Welcome back to the Pulse. Time to get into some business news now. Sars has closed the tax filing season for non-provisional taxpayers, with the revenue collector saying it's pleased with these taxpayers. The revenue collector says the compliance rate among the provisional taxpayers increased by 1 million this year, with 7 million taxpayers filing returns. During last week's medium-term budget policy statement, National Treasury reported a 57 billion rand shortfall it expected in revenue, blaming the lower revenues on reduced mining tax receipts and higher value-added tax payments. We're now joined by Sars Commissioner Edward Kieswetter. Commissioner, just looking at that story on the provisional taxpayers, what did you do right there to get the compliance right?
Well, these are non-provisional taxpayers, Matteo. And I think it is the collective investment over the last number of years that is demonstrating and showing the improvement that we have shared. So to have 1 million more taxpayers already filed compared to 6 million last year is in fact a significant improvement. And it is about creating an experience that is seamless. So this year, for example, almost 4 million taxpayers would not have had to file a return. We have used third-party data sources from banks, from retirement funds and other third-party data sources, and then using machine learning algorithms and risk detection tools and technologies, we're able to give a seamless experience. And so those taxpayers would not have had to file, but their obligation is completed.
During that medium-term budget, during that medium-term budget speech last week, we're looking at a revenue shortfall coming through from SARS. Where exactly did the shortfall come from? Was it the load shedding and the logistics side of things? And do you expect income payments in terms of tax to also be down?
Matteo, I think an insightful perspective on revenue is that actually at gross revenue level, we have seen an increase of 4.5% year-on-year growth, and 1 billion rand more than what the minister had estimated in his February estimate. Now that's important because that has taken place in an economy that is expected to grow nominally by about 4.3%. What has truncated that revenue is that we have paid out 29 billion rand more in refunds than what Treasury expected in the original printed estimate. It's actually interesting that if our refunds were at the level that Treasury had expected, we would not have had a revenue shortfall. But we are also pleased to say that we have seen positive signs, and I'll come to your point in a moment. We've also seen positive signs in other sectors. So, for example, in the financial sector, we have seen a year-on-year growth of 7.8%. In wholesale, retail and vehicle segments, we have seen a 6.2% growth. In the community services sector, a 6.8% growth. The one big year-on-year variance is in the mining sector, where we have seen year-on-year growth of just over 55% down. That, coming back to your point, largely driven by a slowdown in production levels. We have seen also a decline in demand for coal in Europe, but a huge impact on electricity and the logistics segment. So mines cannot produce if they don't have electricity. And if they produce and they can't get their goods in time to the ports, then they also end up stockpiling and not converting it to sales. And so combined, the Eskom and Transnet impact on load shedding has had, in our estimation and confirmed by other economists, more than 200 billion of impact on tax revenue. We have seen areas where we have seen buoyancy. In gross VAT refund, we have seen 14.7 billion up. In fuel levy, we've seen 7 billion up. In individual taxes, we've seen 5 billion up. So I think if you look at gross revenue, you actually see a very different perspective of what's happening in the economy. And then we also want to place focus on what SARS effort produces, which is what we call compliance revenue. There we see a year-on-year growth in compliance revenue of 28%. And what that really tells you is if it were not for the effort from SARS's administrative actions, then our revenue shortfall would have been at least double what the minister announced in his medium-term budget statement.
Now, Commissioner, there's been a great drive to digitize the work at SARS. How has that helped to better collect revenues in the country?
Well, so I shared with you the auto assessment, but the auto assessment not only provides a seamless experience to taxpayer, it also helps us to detect non-compliance. So, for example, I can tell you that just this year, 12 billion rand have been raised from the verification of just over 1.1 million returns. That is 12 billion that would not be in the kitty if it were not for the data science work that detects those instances of non-compliance in the first place. In other areas where we have also detected and added additional revenue are areas such as the tobacco and other illicit activities. We have 181 state capture cases in progress and have 127 cases over to the NPA. From that work, which is also supported by data and technology, we have added another 2.3 billion. And then we have, maybe just if you zoom out, SARS has to process 27 million tax returns in a single year from various taxpayers and various tax products. It would be impossible to capture and manually assess all of those returns. So without technology and data, our work would be well nigh impossible. I am old enough to remember that in 2006, it would take about 6 months on average for an assessment to be done by SARS, and we would promise you a refund within 40 working days if you were not selected for an audit.
Yeah.
Today, I can share with you 93% of returns are processed in under 5 seconds, and 80% of those are refunded to taxpayers in under 72 hours. We've already paid out 29 billion rand in refunds to individual taxpayers purely as a result of our ability to use data and technology to augment the work that our people perform.
Commissioner, the South African Revenue Service has apologized to taxpayers for that threatening text message warning them of criminal action for not submitting their income returns. Do you feel this time around in collecting the taxes in the country there was a bit more pressure than the commodity boom that we saw last year that brought in that record revenue?
No, to suggest that SARS is approaching our work differently because of economic pressures and revenue shortfall is a real untruth. I can say without any fear of contradiction, we are becoming more diligent in administering the laws that we have to do. We are encouraged that most taxpayers are honest. That SMS was a avoidable error on our part because what it meant is taxpayers, there was nothing incorrect in the SMS, but it fell way below our standards of professional communication. That should have gone out as a media statement, not sent to individual taxpayers, because most of them who received the SMS were actually compliant, and those SMSs were meant for non-compliant taxpayers. We have addressed that and taken action as far as that's concerned. Our apology, therefore, was sincere because we direct that apology to honest taxpayers. But to those who are dishonest and to those who remain non-compliant, they will feel and have to face the legal consequences of failing to register when they ought to, of not filing a return when they clearly have economic activities that provides them with income, and when they don't pay the monies that are due to SARS. We make no apology for administering the law and for holding those taxpayers to book.
I guess the words do ring true. You can never run away from the tax man. That was SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter there talking to us about South Africa's revenue situation going into next year's budget. You can